um, welcome everybody to the 34th office hours presentation. And I think, you all probably have experience where you get the beach ball, you get the classic FileMaker coffee cup or the hourglass. And while they can mean different things, just getting them is super annoying, and especially if they happen on a repetitive basis. From a user experience, where they may not understand that it's related to server speeds, connections, calculations, scripts, and unstored versus stored values, or even themes. All that they see is the seconds that seem to get multiplied as they wait. So 3 seconds is the equivalent of 6 seconds, and it just really annoys them. And especially if it's something that they have to do on a repetitive basis, as I said. So keeping on top of the preventable delays can make a huge difference in the user's perception and the value of the system. The more they encounter delays, the less they value the solution, which then opens up the door to shopping for alternatives. So today, Jeff is going to be discussing some of these delays and options on how to resolve them, or things just to keep your system speedy. And don't hesitate to put something in the chat if you have an experience you want to share, or are having a current issue that looks related to this discussion. So at this point, Jeff, I'll let you take off.
All right, thanks so much, Brian. Yeah, actually, I was going to start off with very similar information to what Brian just shared. Whenever I'm thinking about this situation, this topic of speed in your system, I am reminded of a client I had a while back. It was a rather large client, a multi-trillion-dollar company, so that kind of narrows it down a bit. You can probably guess which multi-trillion-dollar company is using FileMaker. But they came to me because they had a report that they were running every night. Had a lot of complex calculations, and when it started out, they would kick it off at 11 p.m. They had it running on the server, and it was taking about 4 hours. And then it crept up to 4.5, and then 5 as more and more data got into the system. By the time they got to me, it was at 6.5. And the main reason that they were coming to me is because they were afraid that if they continued down the road they were going, that it would get to the point where it was taking 8, 9, 10 hours, and they'd come in the morning and the script wouldn't even be done yet. So they handed me a bunch of PDFs that it had output and told me to have at it, see what I could do with it. And I worked on it a little bit, 4 or 5 hours, and found some stuff that kind of surprised me. And I ran some tests and was pretty shocked. And I went back to him and I said, I think it is working the same way it was before. It's producing the same results, but I really need you to run this and look it over because I can't believe what I'm seeing. And they tried it out, and sure enough, it was working. But what shocked us all is that I had taken their 6.5-hour script and gotten it down to 17 seconds. Now, most of the time, that's not going to happen. You're not going to normally see 140,000% increase in speed. But today we're going to go over a bunch of things that you can do, mostly simple things that can really improve the user experience and make things just a lot snappier. So let me pull up my screen and we will go from there. So some of you may recognize this database. I created it yesterday, but it's from one of Claire's templates, their contact template. And I've made a couple of tweaks to it just to show some things. First of all, what I want to show is some issues that I've noticed are very common in doing finds. And as I mentioned to Brian before everybody came in, if you guys have any questions in the middle of what I'm saying, by all means, pop in, stick it in the chat, because I'm going to do a few things that are going to take a few minutes. And I'll kind of be rambling while they're going on. And if you've got anything else that you need help with during that time, by all means, tell me. But one thing that I've seen a lot, you'll notice this phone number field down here. What I've done is we have our contacts table, and there's also a phone numbers table. And when you go into the relationship graph, you'll see they're very simple, just got a primary key equal to the foreign key. And what a lot of people will do is they will take that phone number in the foreign table and create a calculation. So you'll see this is a list of all of the phone numbers that are related to this contact. And of course, it's unstored. And the reason it's unstored is because it can't be anything else. If you're creating a calculation that's based on a different table, it's going to be unstored. There's nothing you can do to change that. So when I do a search in this phone field, let me look for 901 because that was the area code that was up. I'm going to hit enter. And first of all, you'll see nothing happens. Absolutely nothing. It's not even that it's taken a long time to find, just nothing. And the reason for that, a lot of people will set it up so that when you go into layout mode and you click on these fields, it's set up, these are all grouped, so that it'll go to the next object using return and enter. Now, sometimes it's okay to have that, but when you go into find mode, that's going to slow you down because you have to click that find button at the top. So I'm going to turn off return and enter on those, go back into browse mode, and now when I find, I can type in 901 and hit enter, and the find begins. Now, a lot of you are probably very familiar with this dialog that's popped up. So we're going to sit here and wait for it. But while we're doing that, I want to talk a little bit more about the relationship. You noticed that these two tables are only one, we call them jumps, one jump from each other. There's one relationship between the contact and the phone number. That can slow things down a little bit, but it's not going to be bad. Personally, I find that 3, even 4 jumps, 4 relationships are probably not going to cause a huge problem. But one thing that can really slow you down is when those graphs get really big. When you've got 5, 6, 7 relationships out, that can cause a problem. And a lot of times it will become what we call spider graphs. Looks like a spider. You got this one table in the middle and it just goes out in every direction. What we tend to do is use a technique called anchor buoy, and you can look this up online. There are plenty of pages about it, but anchor buoy just really simplifies your graph in that you have each layout based on a table, and then you just have the relationships to that table. So for example, I'd have a contact table occurrence with phone addresses, whatever else. And then I'd also have a phone anchor table, and it would be related to contacts, etc. And whichever layout I'm looking at, it's going to be based on that anchor table. So we finally found our 901s. And I'm going to pull up my data viewer. Shoot, it didn't show how long it was, but you guys saw how long it took. I'm going to pop over to contact details indexed. The reason I'm going to do that is because we also have a relationship here. And this relationship is that one hop away phone. And when I go into find mode, and I'm just going to do a search for 452, just pick a random number, hit enter, boom, comes up immediately. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen that relationship with a calculation, and it's just going to slow you down. Use the related tables in your layouts, and that's going to speed things up considerably. Now, let's go back to the contact details. What I've done here, you see this button called loop. That's attached to a script that I have in here, loop with lower. It performs a search, and then it goes through those records, sets the last name to the lowercase version of the last name. Now, the reason I created this script with a search is because the first time I tried it, you'll notice I've got 185,000 records in here. It was taking a very, very long time. But I'm going to start the loop. And what it's going to do is, first of all, it's going to find the records that are in accordance with that search. And then it goes through it. I'm not sure if you guys can see it on your screen, but every second or two, it's updating the record that's on the screen. Can you see that, Brian? That they're changing. So looping through these, okay, we're doing the update. It's taking its time. But once we get through all of them, we're going to have, I created a variable so it can show us how many it's processing. A lot of the problem with this is just the screen refresh. As silly as it sounds, when you do a system update, you have to update some software or update your operating system or whatever. I've heard the statistic, and I don't know that this is accurate across the board, but I've heard that install can take up to 20% longer just because there's a progress bar on the screen, because it has to keep updating the screen. Whereas if it were just doing it in the background and you weren't seeing anything, there wouldn't be anything to display, and it wouldn't have to use all those processor cycles to make it look nice. Well, that's what's happening here. As it updates all these people, it's making it look nice. Has anybody else had an experience with this? Because, as I said, it's taken a couple minutes. Anyone on the Mainspring team seen this before? Yeah. A lot of times what I'll do is actually send it over to a blank layout based on the same table. If there's nothing for it to see, there's nothing for it to refresh. So it's finally gotten through the 1100 records. And I've got the duration here. It was processing about 8.87 records per second. Okay, obviously that was kind of boring. But you'll see I've got it popping up a second button now for freeze. This is going to do the exact same thing, but this time it's freezing the screen. That means that it's not showing each of those records as it goes through it. Now, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but every couple seconds, the cursor also changes to a command period. So it tells us we can quit. But again, the longer it goes, the longer you're going to see that. See something in the chat. Yeah, Austin says Windows 95 had the opposite problem. Moving the mouse forced the system to update and made it faster. Yeah, I do vaguely remember that. Any other feedback on that? Chugging along, taking its time. Believe it or not, it is a little faster. I kind of like the fact that the freeze button turns kind of a light blue like icicles. Stupid little thing. So going back to the blank layout I was mentioning earlier, one thing I always do is in every system, I will create a blank layout for every table that's in the system. And that way, when I'm doing a find or an update or whatever, I can send it to that layout and it will work on that and perform its find or its sort or whatever. It doesn't have to update anything on the screen. I make the layout as small as I possibly can. Just leave a body, no header, no footer. Shrink the width down to 10 pixels, which is the smallest it can be. Shrink the height to 1 pixel, which is the smallest it can be. And then you're just presented with a white screen with nothing on it. And amazing how much speed that adds to it. So finally, we've gotten through it. And I'm going to go in here again. Now we have the duration freeze. That time it actually took a little longer. Sometimes that happens with the network latency or whatever. Usually this will be a little bit faster. I've noticed it's usually about 10-20% faster. That brings us to replace. Now, obviously, we've been looping through these records. That means it has to open each record, commit it, move on to the next. Replace is the same thing you're going to find in the records menu. Replace field contents. It's obviously grayed out right now because I don't have any fields selected. But if I click replace, it's going to give me a nice little dialog. And that dialog is going to tell me exactly what it's doing, exactly how long it's taking to replace those and how much it has left to go. You guys have probably seen this dialog as well. You'll see it's counting down a lot faster than that loop was. And if we give it just maybe 20 more seconds or so, always like as those numbers drop and they get down to the 2 digits, you know, you're just about ready to go. Here it comes. 26.16 records per second. So by doing a replace instead of a loop, we have tripled our speed. But wait, there's more. Now we've got a button called server. Now, some of you have probably seen this before as well. There's a function in FileMaker, perform script on server. What perform script on server does is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of doing everything on your local machine, it sends it to the FileMaker server, has the FileMaker server do it, and then it updates on your screen much more quickly. There are two options with this. The first is wait for completion on. Wait for completion on is nice because that way you get some feedback. It sits there and goes until it's done. And you know that it's done because the beach ball stops spinning. Check that out. 216.46 records per second. We're now like 8 times faster, 7 to 8 times faster than even the replace. And like 25 times faster than the original loop. Now we've got another one, callback. Now, a lot of you may not have seen this one. This is a new feature in FileMaker 2023. And to emphasize, because it's new to 2023, you absolutely must be running FileMaker 2023 Pro and FileMaker 2023 on your server. If you do not have both upgraded to the latest version, this will not work. But we have a new script step called perform script on server with callback. So that's going to run the same script that we just ran, replace proper, but when it's done, it's going to run a script on my machine. So this is just like leaving the wait for completion off. So you don't have to wait for it to be done, but it'll alert you when it's done. So now let's go in here. We'll click the callback. The script starts, and I can go on and do whatever else I need to do. And when it's done, it pops up that dialog that I told it to pop up. And you'll see it's a little bit slower. I'm sure a lot of that's network latency, but we still got almost 200 records per second, and it didn't get in my way. So a lot of times this will be really nice if you've got something like those longer scripts, like the 6.5 hour one that I was talking about. You can set it off on the server, and once the server gets through doing everything that it's doing, boom, sends you back an alert or runs a script on your machine to pop open a new window and find the records that it just updated. Whatever you want it to do, you can have it run any script you want. The only catch is that when you do the callback script, that script parameter that you're sending to the callback script is going to be what that variable, for example, is at that time. So in this case, I have a start underscore server script. The reason I did, or sorry, variable, the reason I did this as a global variable instead of just doing $start like I did in the rest of these is because that $start goes with this script, replace with proper with callback. It does not go with replace complete. Even if I put that in the script parameter for replace complete, that variable would be empty by the time replace complete starts, because it's just local to this script, and this script is long since over. So I used a $sign to stick it in the global, and then it comes back in here and clears out that global after it gives us the duration. So just a little caveat to watch out for. So 3 different versions of Perform Script on Server. First, you can wait for completion, which means you can't do any work while it's doing it, but it gets back to you when it's done. Second, you can turn off wait for completion and it just does it, but doesn't let you know when it's done. Or if you have 2023, you can do the wait for completion with callback, Perform Script on Server with callback, and that'll run whatever you need when it comes back. Now, I also want to go over a few little things that might speed it up. Don't really need to have a demo, but just talk about a few things that I've noticed over the years I've been working with FileMaker. One thing I've noticed is with IDs. Now, by default, FileMaker Pro will create an ID field in each table when you create it. So I'm going to create a new table here, just call it new table. And it creates some default fields. Now, you can look online. This is actually defined in an XML file that's hiding in the bowels of your system. It's actually, I believe it's inside the FileMaker Pro application in Mac OS now, but Windows, I believe it's still in the system itself. But you can edit what your default fields are going to be. By default, it's going to create an ID, and that ID will be of type text. And when you come in here, it will say get UUID. But there's also another function, get UUID number. I have tweaked the XML on my own machine so that it creates a number field and uses get UUID number. Because believe it or not, that number field is about 30% faster on the relationships than the text field. I don't know why FileMaker uses the standard get UUID when the UUID number is faster, but I've set it up so that comes in by default on mine. So that can save you a little time on yours. And again, if you want to know where that XML file is, there are plenty of places you can look online for the field definition XML file. Second thing, themes. We talked about themes in a previous office hours, but I wanted to point out once again, themes really do speed up your system. They are based on CSS, which is Cascading Style Sheets. It's web technology. And basically what the CSS does is it allows you to create a definition for every layout object of a certain type. For example, all of these buttons on here, if I click on this, I can see that this is fill highlight. When I click on each of these, they're all fill highlight. So if I change that to red and then update the style, they all turn to red because now fill highlight is red. So when the system pulls up the layout, it sees fill highlight and it just grabs all the information about fill highlight and applies it to all these buttons instead of figuring out what each of these 5 buttons has to be individually. You get a lot of objects on your layout that can really speed things up a lot. Another thing to watch out for, many files, particularly the old ones from back before FileMaker 12 especially, but even into 12 or 13, a lot of files that were created in those older versions will have layouts based on the classic theme. The classic theme was deprecated in version 13 and was deleted completely in version 16. And the reason I bring this up is because there's a darn good reason they got rid of it. The purpose of the classic theme was when they introduced themes in version 12, they wanted to make sure that the old instant web publishing would continue to work with version 12, even with the themes. So Classic has a lot of junk in it. It is an absolutely huge theme with all sorts of weird stuff in there that has no purpose other than make it work with instant web publishing. In version 13, they got rid of instant web publishing, replaced it with WebDirect, which many of our clients use now. And that's great. But the classic theme no longer really has a purpose because the whole reason to have it was to make sure that instant web publishing worked. By continuing to have the classic theme in there, it slows things down because of all the extra stuff. It can slow down your searches. We've seen weird sorts come up because it's based on all that extra stuff in the classic theme. If you have any layouts that seem to give you slowdowns on a regular basis, take a look in layout mode, see if it happens to be using the classic theme. If it is, highly recommend you just create a new layout. Don't try to change the one you have. Just create a new one. Use any of the themes in your system or even a custom theme that you've created. Copy and paste what you can, but if you can just create it all new, and if you don't have hundreds and hundreds of objects on there, just create it new. Because if there's any corruption in that classic theme, you don't want to bring that over to your new layout. Now, another difference that I've noticed, going back to that scenario I mentioned at the beginning, where I had the client that had the 6.5 hour script that we got down to 17 seconds. The reason that that was so slow was mostly because it was using a calculation function called execute SQL. Now, execute SQL is an awesome function when used correctly. Many of you have probably heard of SQL. Many of you may even know SQL. It stands for Structured Query Language. It's a database standard language. Microsoft uses it. Of course, MySQL uses it. Oracle, lots of the big names out there base their databases in SQL. And it really is a phenomenal system, but it is a lot harder to learn than something like FileMaker, where you have more of a GUI and more of the ability to build stuff quickly. But FileMaker does have that execute SQL calculation, which is great if you're trying to get fairly short lists or fairly simple lists. For example, I'm going to pop up my data viewer here, and I can say execute SQL, and I'm going to write a short query here. Tell it to select first name. I'm going to have to put that in quotes because it doesn't like that space. Say from, and I'll put the name of the table, which is contacts, and I'll just put that in quotes just to be safe. Say where, let's say last name. This is basically like performing a find, equals question mark. And then I'm going to put in the row separator, the record separator, and then we've got Antonikov here, so let's put that in here. And Antonikov. Now it's going to search across those 185,000 records, and you'll see it's spinning a bit. Taking some time. And if I stick this in a script, if I've got a fairly short list, say there were only 1,000 records in this table, it would probably come up fairly immediately. If I weren't doing the where, so it wasn't actually searching for something, especially if it were a lot fewer records, it would bring up that response fairly quickly. Yes, I typed the close parenthesis, and that's what made Jeff brought up that I need a close parenthesis. I did type it, but the reason I'm beach bowling is because I did type it and it's evaluating the calculation. So anyway, in that particular situation with that script, it had a lot of execute SQLs in the script, and they were taking a long, long time like this. Whereas previously you saw we could do a search on that name field and it would come up fairly instantly. So while this is chugging along, thankfully I have a second copy of FileMaker open because I wanted to show you something else. This is actually a speed boost that I discovered just yesterday. I'm working on a project for a client here. I'll move all this out of the way. And they have several options for a shared budget. You can go to all regions. This client is in Canada. They have Alberta regions and British Columbia regions, or custom. What they want to do is distribute a budget, which can be defined here. Let's say 150,000, or 1.5 million rather. And it can be distributed by a percentage that's hiding in the background, or split equally, or just manually. So when I click distribute by the percentage, it's figuring out what percentage each of these has, and it pulls in the numbers. And you'll see it took 921 milliseconds, which ain't bad. Less than a second. Pull it back. Do an equal split. Again, we'll pop in here 950 milliseconds. Pretty good. Well, what I did was I actually created some calculation fields. I created one that calculates by weight, one that calculates the equal split, and then just the standard budget amount that I already had. And then on this layout, I put 3 different fields: budget amount, the budget amount equal split, and the budget amount by weight. And I put hide conditions on them. So in this case, I've set it up so this one will show up if the allocation method starts with distribute. This one will show up if it's manual. This one will show up if it starts with equal. You go back into browse mode. Oh, I accidentally saved it there. Let's get them all back where they belong. And when I switch between them, it's instant. Go in here, I've got duration refresh. instead of 950 milliseconds, we've got 26 milliseconds. Such a silly little thing. I figured these are unstored calculations. I'm grabbing that budget from a global in a different table, and here I'm multiplying it by the percentages. Here I'm dividing it by the number of records in the found set. But even though I'm displaying unstored calculations, it's considerably faster than replacing all of those values. Why does it work? I don't know. But sometimes it just takes a little trial and error to figure out which is the fastest option to get done what you need to get done. And for anyone that's interested, that sequel's still chugging. You can see why it took 6.5 hours. All right, another thing that you can do, this particular interface is actually not the final data that we're going to be working with. This is a temporary table. There are actually only a few hundred records in here, which helps it to be very quick and speedy. Since we pull up just these temporary records, these are all of the records that are associated with the session ID that we've created. And when this session is done, when I click cancel, it'll delete all these records so it doesn't keep that table particularly full. So when I constrain to Alberta, it only has to look at these 22 records. When I constrain to British Columbia, it only has to look at these 14 records. It's just a small set, and constraining makes it smaller. And then I just do a find to pull it back to everything in the session ID. So again, a temporary table can be very helpful. There are also what's called virtual value lists, which can simplify things greatly. If I go over to custom, this allows me to add whatever regions I like. So I click the first one. And of course I broke it today. So guess I won't show you that. But the point is it's a temporary table, and I'll bet it's not working because I already have everything in there. Moving on. Always got to be something in every demo that doesn't quite work right. Another few silly little things. A lot of times we'll see people looking for if a value exists by using the pattern count function. Pattern count is great. If I wanted to see how many times the letter B appears in this string, boom, it tells me 13. So a lot of times what you'll see is somebody wants to know if there is a B in this string. So they'll just do pattern count and see if it's greater than 0. That gives you 1. Cool. Most of the time, you're not going to notice the amount of time that it takes to do that. But if you're doing it over and over again in a script, if you have to go through a list of 1,000 records, each time you do this, it's going to take however many milliseconds, and they add up. Let's do the same thing here using position. Instead of pattern count, we're just doing this. Search string is B, start is 1, occurrence is 1. So now, instead of looking for how many B's are in this entire string, it's just going until it gets to the first one. Pattern count had to go through all 13 characters to tell you that there's a B in there. Position only had to go to the first character to tell you there's a B in there. Again, if you're just doing one record, no big deal. But if you're looping through a bunch of records, if you're doing a replace, this is going to add up. And going through just one character will really save you time over going through however many there are in the list, especially if you've got a large text field. Another speedy thing. Way back when, back before version 18, a lot of people would create custom functions using recursion. Now, if you don't know what recursion is, the joke is, in order to understand recursion, you first have to understand recursion. Basically, recursion is when you have, for example, a custom function that calls itself over and over and over again, and it has some condition that says, stop calling me. So if you wanted to do, if you wanted to repeat the letter B 15 times, you could create a function that says repeat B 15, and it types B and then calls itself and types B again and calls itself and types B again until it's called itself 15 times and then exits. In version 18, we got a new function called while. And while is actually a little complex to understand at first because you have to initialize variables at the beginning. You have to specify the exit condition. But honestly, once you understand how the while function works, it is so much faster than the old recursion. It speeds through, it doesn't have to call anything else. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to give you the answer that you want in considerably less time than those old recursive functions would. So I've actually gone back. I love making custom functions. I use a lot of different custom functions in my solutions. I've gone back and updated all of the custom functions that were recursive that I use on a regular basis because it just really speeds up the evaluation. And after all that time, we finally have a response from Execute SQL. Look at that, 6 records. All that time, and it gave us 6 different lines of info. Whereas if we could have come back here, we'll go over to the index. Actually, let me copy that name from here. But when we go back to the index field, we can do a search, and boom, comes up immediately. Again, 2 different ways of giving you the exact same information, but one took so long that I gave up, put it on another screen. The other happened basically instantly. So that's about all I have to share today. Let me see if there are any questions in the chat, and if anybody has any more questions, by all means, go ahead and share. What is that data lookup to show the time taken? That's a really good question. What I have done in the scripts in here, you can do get current time UTC microseconds. In previous versions, there was only get current time UTC milliseconds, which does still exist. But what I do in my scripts is that I put that at the start. It stores the microseconds, and that's just going to give you a huge number. Like if I pull this over and do get, and I'll just do micro and it fills in the rest. That gives you the number of microseconds since midnight on January 1st, 1970. Obviously, that's not very helpful. If you really want to know what this comes down to, you can first divide it by 1,000,000. So that gives you how many seconds since January 1st, 1970. And then you can do get as timestamp and wrap the whole thing in that. Another parenthesis there. Table missing. Why is it table missing? Oh, because I got rid of my get for some reason. There we go. And now it's telling us exactly what time it is UTC, right down to the microsecond. And you can actually do this even in a let function. I can do a start here. And then we were talking about pattern count. B. And we'll get his timestamp minus start. And it tells us, so I get rid of that timestamp there. Okay. That in parentheses. Okay, yeah, it's separated. There we go. So it's giving us the time start, and I get rid of the get as timestamp there too, because that's causing us problems. It takes 40 microseconds to get that pattern count. Then let's do the position. See what it takes. 35. Not a huge savings, but again, you have a very long string. The longer that string gets, the more it's going to save you. The further into the string that B is, the more it's going to save you. Now we got it down to 11 on that one, etc. So yeah, I put the microseconds at the beginning of the script or the beginning of the calculation, and then at the end, I just do a global variable that finds it again, subtracts the start. And as you can see in this one, I actually rounded it to 0.2 milliseconds or 0.2 seconds. So I divided by a million and then did records per second. So that could show us exactly what we got. Anything else? All right, going once. Quiet group today.
Yep. Very good, Jeff. Yeah, does anybody else have any examples that they've come across that they want to share of things that they have been stumped on, or solutions that they can describe? Do have somebody typing, so
yes, I see that. Yeah. Other Jeff is saying that he's used execute SQL, which is definitely too slow. And yeah, sometimes it is. And sometimes if you have a small found set, I actually use it quite a bit, but you really need to be judicious. Another text comment. Oh, disappeared. Thomas, did you have something? You can unmute if you like. Oh, yeah, sure. Brian, they're asking for a copy of this.
Yeah.
We'll be uploading it, right? Great.
All right. So, I think one of the themes of the presentation is what I touched on in the intro, and that is all these little things that you can do to increase the speed will make your users happier, and as a a company or whoever makes the decision, regarding databases, keeps FileMaker relevant, and because since it's a custom solution, um, um, I think people maybe don't realize all the time how valuable that is versus a out of the box solution. And so it is just a matter of keeping some of these things up as technology changes. As Jeff was saying, one of the items is only available in 2023, both client and server. And so that's important that that your systems are kept up to date. Take advantage of those things.
And Thomas just mentioned in the chat that he's noticed a large speed increase from 19 to 2023. And
nice.
I would agree with that. I have seen a speed increase in some solutions as well.
Right. Okay, so I think that wraps up our presentation for today. Again, if anybody has a topic that they're interested in, can be something that that you have questions on, or you have found maybe an interesting solution. But let me know what the topic will be. You can email me at bholds@gomainspring.com, and I can put that in the chat as well. And I'll get and we'll get that in the rotation. So, Jeff, appreciate the presentation, and everybody else, thank you for joining, and we'll see you next month at office hours.